I was nothing to them, or so they thought. The quiet one, the leftover kid in the family, their perpetual punchline. My parents built their golden boys up while burying me under the weight of their indifference. My life was a constant stream of their scraps. Daniel's worn-out clothes, Caleb's broken toys. They paid for everything for my brothers while I worked multiple jobs just to afford college. But then, my grandpa Arthur, the only one who ever truly saw me, left his multi-million dollar fortune entirely to me in a shocking will. Now they want in, the family who threw me away. Get ready for the story of how the black sheep inherited everything, and how I delivered the coldest revenge imaginable. My name is Ethan Miller. Growing up, that felt less like a name and more like an afterthought. I was the middle child, sandwiched between Daniel, the eldest, and Caleb, the youngest. In our house, that wasn't a position. It was a vacuum. Daniel was Dad's heir apparent, a miniature version of Robert Miller, all bluster and entitlement from the moment he could walk. Caleb was Mom's darling, her precious baby boy, showered with attention, toys, and a level of affection that felt alien to me. And I was just there. My earliest memories are a tapestry woven with threads of hand-me-downs and handovers. Daniel's clothes, worn thin at the knees, faded from countless washes, were my inheritance. Toys, if they survived Daniel's destructive phases, were then passed to Caleb first. If Caleb broke them, or grew bored, they might, just might, end up in my corner of the shared bedroom. A broken race car missing a wheel, a board game with half the pieces gone, a bike with a bent frame. These were my treasures. Daniel had the newest model every year. Caleb had a dedicated toy room overflowing with the latest gadgets and action figures. My space was defined by absence. Birthdays were a stark reminder of my place. Daniel's were elaborate affairs, themed parties, expensive gifts, all his friends over. Caleb's were sweet, intimate gatherings with Mom hovering, documenting every moment. Mine were usually a rushed cake after dinner, maybe a generic card, the kind you could buy in a pack. One year, they forgot entirely until the next day. I remember Mom's flustered apology, Dad muttering about a busy week. It wasn't malice, not overt cruelty, just a lack of capacity for me. Their emotional bandwidth was full with their favorites. School was no different. Daniel's achievements were celebrated with fanfare, good grades, sports victories. Caleb's little milestones were met with disproportionate praise. My report cards, whether good or bad, were glanced at, signed, and forgotten. Parent-teacher conferences, only for Daniel and Caleb. I learned early on not to expect acknowledgement, positive or negative. It built a quiet self-reliance, a shell I retreated into. As we got older, the disparity widened. College loomed, and for Daniel and Caleb, it was a given. Applications filled out by Mom, expensive campus visits, acceptance letters framed. Their tuition, room, and board at prestigious universities were paid for without a second thought. Discussions around the dinner table revolved around Daniel's fraternity parties or Caleb's challenging coursework. For me? The conversation went something like this. So, Ethan, what are your plans after high school? Dad asked one evening, barely looking up from his newspaper. It was the most direct question he'd asked me about my future in years. I'm looking at state schools, I mumbled, picking at my food. Mom chimed in, her voice laced with a vague lack of interest. Oh, yes. Much more sensible, aren't they? Not everyone needs to go to a fancy out-of-state place like Daniel and Caleb. Sensible meant cheap. Sensible meant I was on my own. There was no offer of help, no discussion of savings, nothing. It was just an accepted fact that my path would be different, less supported, less valued. So, I worked. Through my senior year of high school, weekends and evenings were spent flipping burgers or stocking shelves. Every dollar earned went into a savings account, a meager shield against the financial reality of funding my own education. College was a brutal juggle. Classes during the day, work most evenings and weekends. I ate cheap ramen, wore the same few outfits, and envied the ease with which my peers navigated campus life, free from the constant pressure of bills and rent. While Daniel and Caleb enjoyed the full college experience, joining clubs, socializing freely, I was clocking in. My textbooks often opened beside me during slow shifts. It was exhausting, isolating, and deeply, profoundly unfair. I watched my brothers thrive on the foundation of privilege our parents had built for them, while I chipped away at the rock face alone. Resentment became a bitter undercurrent in my life, a constant companion. There was one person, however, who saw me. My grandfather, Arthur Miller. He lived a few towns over, a quiet man who had built a modest but successful engineering firm from the ground up. He wasn't flashy, didn't put on airs. While Dad and Mom were consumed with their favorites, Grandpa Arthur would call me, just me, and invite me over. He didn't make a big deal of it. No grand pronouncements, no forced family gatherings. Just, "Ethan, free Saturday? Thought we could do some fishing?" Or, "Got a project in the garage, need an extra set of hands if you're up for it." At his house, the air was different, peaceful. He had a workshop filled with tools, a den lined with books. He talked to me like I was a person, an equal. He asked about my day, listened patiently when I spoke about school or work, never interrupting, never comparing me to Daniel or Caleb. He saw the effort I was putting in, the quiet determination forged in the fires of neglect. "You've got grit, Ethan," he'd say, handing me a wrench, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's worth more than any silver spoon." He'd tell me stories about his own struggles building his business, the setbacks, the long hours. He understood hard work, understood what it meant to build something from nothing. He was the only one who seemed to appreciate that I wasn't just coasting, that I was fighting for every inch. He wasn't overtly critical of my parents or brothers in front of me, but his quiet observations spoke volumes. He'd see my ill-fitting clothes, and the next time I visited, casually mention he'd found some old jackets that might fit me, always slightly too big but new and sturdy. He'd notice my tired eyes and suggest I take a break, offering me a comfortable chair and a cold drink. He didn't try to replace what my parents lacked, but he filled the gaping hole with genuine care and respect. He'd give me small amounts of money sometimes, not as an allowance, but for specific tasks, helping him fix a fence, organizing his garage. It wasn't charity. It felt like fair compensation for work done, like he valued my time and effort. He even quietly helped me buy my first reliable used car during college, making sure it was safe and dependable. "A young man needs to be mobile," he'd said with a wink. That car represented freedom, a physical manifestation of his belief in my independence. Grandpa Arthur became my anchor, my confidant, the only person in my family who felt like family. I looked forward to our time together more than anything. I helped him with chores, listened to his stories, just sat in comfortable silence sometimes. I wasn't trying to gain anything. I just genuinely loved being with him. He made me feel seen, heard, and valued. His health began to decline when I was in my late 20s. It was slow at first, then more rapid. I visited him as often as I could, sometimes just sitting by his bedside, holding his hand. My parents and brothers visited too, of course, but their visits felt perfunctory, shorter. They seemed uncomfortable with illness, more focused on logistics than connection. I saw them exchange glances about arrangements, while Grandpa was still lucid. It sickened me. When he passed away, the grief hit me like a physical blow. He was the only one who had consistently shown me love and support. His funeral was a blur. My parents put on a show of being the grieving family, accepting condolences. Daniel and Caleb looked somber. but seemed more preoccupied with their phones or hushed conversations. I stood apart, the ache in my chest a raw, gaping wound. Then came the will reading. A few weeks after the funeral, we gathered in the office of Mr. Henderson, Grandpa Arthur's longtime attorney. The air was thick with anticipation. My parents sat stiffly, Daniel and Caleb beside them, their wives Sarah and Jessica perched nervously on their chairs. I sat slightly separate, as always, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, my mind still replaying memories of Grandpa. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses. He spoke about Grandpa Arthur's life, his values, his wishes. We all knew Grandpa had done well, but his true wealth wasn't something he flaunted. My parents and brothers probably expected a distribution, a piece for everyone, maybe favoring Daniel as the eldest son, or Caleb as Mom's favorite, with a smaller portion for me, the black sheep. That's how it always worked. Mr. Henderson began reading the specifics. Bequests to a few charities Grandpa supported. Small amounts for distant relatives. Then, the main assets. The properties, his primary residence, a sprawling estate upstate worth tens of millions. Several commercial buildings in the city, vast tracts of land. His investment portfolio, meticulously built over decades, valued at a staggering amount. His personal effects, his art collection, his vehicles. As the numbers were read out, the calm silence in the room grew heavy, punctuated only by the rustle of papers. The total value was immense, far exceeding anything we had imagined. We were talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Then, Mr. Henderson reached the crucial part. The residuary estate. Everything not specifically itemized. He looked directly at me. Arthur Miller's will names his grandson, Ethan Miller, as the sole beneficiary of his entire residuary estate, including all real property, investments, and remaining assets. The room went absolutely still. I felt a wave of shock, then a strange, cold calm wash over me. I didn't look at my family. I just stared at Mr. Henderson. My mother gasped. My father's jaw dropped. Daniel sputtered something unintelligible. Caleb just looked stunned. Sarah and Jessica exchanged wide-eyed glances. Mr. Henderson continued, his voice steady. Mr. Miller was very clear in his instructions. He wanted his assets to go to the person he felt best embodied his values of hard work, perseverance, and integrity. He specifically noted Ethan's dedication to funding his own education and building his own life despite facing challenges. He paused, his gaze flicking almost imperceptibly towards my parents. The implication hung in the air. He then named the executor. Mr. Miller appointed his wife, Eleanor Miller, as the executor of his will. Grandma Eleanor, quiet and dignified, sat beside Mr. Henderson. She met my eyes and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent confirmation. She knew. Grandpa had told her. She was here to ensure his wishes were fulfilled, without question, without deviation. She would navigate the probate court, the legal complexities, and ensure every single asset went to me. The meeting ended in a daze. My parents and brothers were reeling. They stammered congratulations, but their eyes were filled with disbelief, confusion, and something else, a dawning horror. The black sheep, the forgotten son, had inherited everything. The probate process began, handled meticulously by Grandma Eleanor and Mr. Henderson. It took time, as large estates do, but it proceeded smoothly. The will was airtight. There was no room for contestation, not successfully anyway. My parents consulted lawyers, I later learned, but were advised it would be futile. Grandpa Arthur had planned this carefully, ensuring his wishes couldn't be overturned. During this time, something else was happening. My own life, built on the foundation of my struggles, had been steadily progressing. The work ethic I developed in college paid off. I had started a small tech consulting business while still working my part-time jobs, building it slowly, client by client. By my early 30s, it was stable and profitable. The inheritance didn't make me successful. It amplified the success I had already earned. It provided resources to scale, to invest, to secure a future I had once only dreamed of. Then, the calls started. The texts, the emails, the sudden surge of interest from the family who had barely acknowledged my existence for 3 decades. "Ethan? Hey, buddy, it's Daniel. Long time, huh? We should catch up." "Ethan, darling, it's Mom. How are you? We were just talking about you. We should have dinner soon." "Yo, Ethan, Caleb here. Heard things are, going well. We gotta grab a beer." Their wives, Sarah and Jessica, who had previously treated me with polite indifference, were suddenly reaching out too. "Ethan, Sarah here. Daniel told me about your exciting news. We should totally have a family brunch." Their attempts were clumsy, transparent. They didn't ask how I was. They just wanted to get close to the money. The fake warmth was nauseating. They spoke about family, about mending bridges, about putting the past behind us. Putting the past behind us? Their past, maybe. The past where they ignored me, belittled me, left me to struggle. That past was etched into my bones. Every late-night shift, every ramen dinner, every time I watched my brothers effortlessly receive what I had to fight for. That was the past they wanted to conveniently forget. They invited me to family gatherings, events I had never been included in before. Suddenly, there was space at the table for Ethan. My father, who had rarely looked me in the eye, now smiled too broadly, asking superficial questions about my business ventures. My mother, whose affection was reserved for Caleb, now cooed about how proud she was of me. Daniel and Caleb, who had treated me like a pesky younger brother when they acknowledged me at all, now spoke of potential synergies between my holdings and their careers, thinly veiled attempts to get a piece of the pie. Sarah and Jessica were the worst. They hovered, asking about my plans for the upstate estate, hinting about wanting to redecorate or suggesting family vacations there. They saw the inheritance as a family pool to be shared, and they were determined to stake their claim. It was grotesque. Watching them twist themselves into knots, feigning interest and affection, all for money. It was the ultimate validation, in a sick, twisted way. My worth to them had finally been defined, not by who I was, but by what I had inherited. For weeks, I let it play out. I took their calls, responded vaguely to their texts, observed their desperation. It was a perverse kind of entertainment, watching the people who had dismissed me now groveling for my attention. The resentment that had simmered for so long began to transform into something colder, harder. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about a lifetime of being made to feel less than, and now having the power to turn the tables completely. Grandpa, Arthur hadn't just given me wealth. He had given me leverage. He had given me the means to settle the score, not with violence or destruction, but with the quiet, devastating power of denial. The desire for revenge, cold and precise, solidified within me, not to harm them physically or even financially, beyond denying them the inheritance, but to deny them what they now wanted most: access to me and, through me, access to Grandpa's legacy. They had excluded me from their lives when I had nothing. Now I would exclude them from mine when I had everything. The final confrontation wasn't a dramatic showdown. It was something quieter, more controlled. I invited them to a meeting at Mr. Henderson's office. My parents, Daniel, Caleb, Sarah, and Jessica. They arrived, looking expectant, hopeful. They probably thought I was going to announce some sort of family trust, some distribution plan. I sat at the head of the conference table, Mr. Henderson and Grandma Eleanor, at my request, seated beside me. They sat opposite, a united front of faux family warmth. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "I wanted to talk to you all, face to face, about things." My mother smiled brightly. "Oh, Ethan, dear, we're so glad you called this meeting. We've missed you so much." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a mother who didn't love me. I saw a woman who had made a choice, who had prioritized her own needs and her favored children over my well-being. "Let's not pretend," I said, cutting through the saccharine facade. "Let's be honest about why you're all suddenly so interested in me." Their smiles faltered. My father shifted uncomfortably. "Ethan, that's not fair," Daniel started. "We're family. Are we?" I challenged, meeting his eyes. "When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Before Grandpa's will was read?" Silence. "When was the last time you invited me for a holiday meal because you actually wanted me there? Not out of obligation, or because someone forced you?" I looked at my parents. "When was the last time either of you asked me about my struggles? About how I was managing working full-time and going to school?" More silence. Their faces were growing pale. "You built your lives, your family unit, and you consciously left me out," I continued, my voice still calm, but laced with an edge. "You gave Daniel everything Dad had to offer. His time, his pride, his resources. You gave Caleb everything Mom had. Her affection, her endless support, her resources. You gave me whatever was left. Worn-out clothes, broken toys, an expectation that I would figure it out on my own." I looked at Daniel and Caleb. "You got paid tuition, living expenses, cars. I worked 3 jobs to pay for state school, ate ramen because it was all I could afford, drove a beat-up car Grandpa helped me buy. You had safety nets. I had a tightrope." Their wives tried to interject, murmuring about bygones and forgiveness. "Forgiveness?" I scoffed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "Forgiveness is earned, and honestly, I'm not interested in granting it. Not when your sudden interest is solely dictated by the dollar signs in Grandpa's will." My mother started to cry, the performative kind. "Ethan, how can you say that? We love you." "Love?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash on my tongue. "Is that what you call it? Neglect? Indifference? Treating one child like a burden while showering the others with everything? That's not love. That's favoritism, and it's cruel." My father finally spoke, his voice gruff. "Arthur's will was a mistake. He was old. He didn't understand." "He understood. Perfectly," I interrupted, glancing at Grandma Eleanor, who gave another small, firm nod. "He saw what was happening. He saw my struggle and he appreciated it. He was the only one who did. He gave me his time, his respect, and his love when you all couldn't be bothered. His will wasn't a mistake, Dad. It was a message, a consequence." Paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "Grandpa Arthur left his entire estate to me because he knew I wouldn't squander it, because he knew I valued hard work, and because he wanted to ensure that the person who was always treated as least important finally had the security and recognition he deserved." I stood up. Mr. Henderson stood with me. "I understand you're disappointed," I said, looking down at their stunned faces. "You saw a vast fortune and assumed it was family money to be divided. But it's not. It's Grandpa Arthur's legacy, entrusted to me." My father sputtered. "But we're your family. We deserve a part of—" "You forfeited any claim to that a long time ago," I stated flatly. "When you chose to neglect me, when you prioritized your favorites, when you showed me over and over again that I wasn't worth your time, your effort, or your resources." I looked at each of them, letting them see the cold finality in my eyes. "I have everything I need. Grandpa's legacy, my own success built despite your indifference. I don't need your validation, and I certainly don't need your sudden, self-serving affection. So here's the reality, I continued. Grandma Eleanor, as the executor, will continue to administer the estate precisely according to Grandpa's will. Every asset goes to me. There will be no family fund, no shared investments, no bailouts for poor financial decisions you might make. What's mine is mine. My mother let out a small sob. Daniel looked furious, Caleb bewildered. Their wives were visibly calculating their losses. As for mending bridges and family, I'm not interested, I said, my voice firm. You had your chance, for 30 years. You showed me exactly how you value me. Now, I'm showing you how I value you, which is to say, not at all. I picked up my briefcase. This meeting is over. Mr. Henderson will handle all legal matters. Any further attempts to contact me regarding the inheritance or attempting to guilt-trip me will be ignored. Consider the bridge burned. You built the fire. I turned and walked out, Grandma Eleanor following quietly behind me. I didn't look back. Leaving that office felt like shedding a heavy cloak I had carried my entire life. The bitterness was still. There the scars of neglect were permanent, but they no longer defined me. I was no longer the black sheep, the leftover kid. I was Ethan Miller, the man who had built his own success, the grandson who had been truly loved, and the inheritor of a legacy far greater than just money, a legacy of validation and ultimate vindication. The attempts didn't stop immediately. Texts turned desperate, then angry. My mother left voicemails, alternating between tearful pleas and passive-aggressive accusations. Daniel and Caleb sent increasingly aggressive emails, referencing my moral obligation. Sarah and Jessica tried social media, sending friend requests and public messages about missing family. I blocked their numbers. I filtered their emails. I unfriended them on social media. I built a wall, thick and impenetrable. I had spent my life on the outside, looking in, craving acceptance. Now, they were on the outside, looking in, craving access. And I held the key. The revenge wasn't in taking something from them. It was in refusing to give them what they now craved. It was in denying them the comfort of a mended relationship, denying them access to wealth, denying them the chance to rewrite history. It was letting them live with the consequence of their choices, watching from afar as their entitlement clashed with the reality of their situation. Life since then has been peaceful. I focused on growing my business, investing wisely, and honoring Grandpa Arthur's memory. I renovated his upstate estate, turning it into a sanctuary where I could work, think, and finally relax. I supported causes I cared about, following Grandpa's example of quiet generosity. I haven't spoken to my parents or brothers since that day in Mr. Henderson's office. There are times, rare times, when a flicker of sadness or longing for a normal family might surface. But then I remember the hand-me-downs, the forgotten birthdays, the financial struggles I faced alone, the look on their faces when the will was read. And the feeling passes, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of knowing I broke the cycle. They chose their favorites, they built their walls, and in the end, they trapped themselves outside of the only door that mattered. Grandma Eleanor and I remain close. She is in many ways the last link to the good part of my past, a quiet co-conspirator in upholding Grandpa's wishes. She sees the peace I've found, the man I've become. My life is not defined by the millions, but by the journey I took to get here. The struggles made me strong. Grandpa's love made me believe in myself. The family's neglect fueled a fire that, while painful, ultimately propelled me forward. And the inheritance? It was the final, definitive statement that I was seen, I was valued, and I finally had the power to choose who was in my life. And those who had cast me out? They were staying exactly where they belonged, on the outside, looking in. And that, for the black sheep, was the sweetest revenge of all.